Welcome. Today's project's on 5 common anxiety fears. Now, if you're suffering from GAD, well, these fears are going to resonate with you. And people who are suffering from GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, they're continuously sensitive to the world around them. They're continuously reacting to those irrational thoughts. Those thoughts that snowball anxiety to the extreme. So, what happens when you respond to these irrational thoughts with high emotion? Well, they're going to be more ingrained, they're going to be strengthened, those neural pathways are going to harden. And so you're going to respond and keep thinking those irrational thoughts all the time. But also, the amygdala, the part of the brain that initiates the fight, flight, or freeze response, this system is going to perceive these threats, these sensations, as being life threatening. Those thoughts, those irrational thoughts, the amygdala is going to perceive those thoughts, those sensations, as being a predator. And this amygdala, this anxiety system, is millions of years old. So when you're out in public and you feel the sensations of anxiety, the heart palpitations, those strange sensations, and you run away from the environment, you're now perceiving that environment as being a predator, life-threatening. The same system that we used to detect tigers and lions and bears as being deadly. They're going to eat us. They're going to kill us. It's the same system. So now that you ran away from that environment, you're now perceiving that environment as a predator. As if you go back there, and you might experience this, when you go back to that same environment, what happens? The anxiety system kicks in, and now you run away again. And then you stay away. And people with agoraphobia now stay at home. And that's how agoraphobia comes about. They're afraid of going back into that environment and facing that predator, right? Because you now perceive it as being life-threatening. So it's important to not run away from the environment. Do not run away. That is crucial. Now, I'm going to get into the 5 common anxiety fears. Do you have any of these fears? Because I used to. When I suffered from generalized anxiety disorder, I was extremely sensitized to the world. I suffered from all of these fears, and I responded to these irrational thoughts with such high emotion, and thus believing them to be true. So number 5 is vomiting. Vomiting was such a huge fear for me. I would be out in public, and it would always be in public. I would experience this in like a classroom setting, or on the subway, or at work, or at a concert, where I would feel this nauseous sensation, and all of a sudden irrational thoughts would follow. What if I throw up? What if I embarrass myself while I throw up? People will think I'm a fool. And I was afraid of that social judgment. People were going to judge me. And so I always responded to this sensation as being something that is not good, right? If I throw up here, it's not gonna be pretty. And when your anxiety system is active, it interferes and with all your other bodily systems, the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, and the nauseous feeling, which comes from your digestive system. So when your anxiety response is active, your body is preparing itself to flee, to fight, to freeze, right? And so adrenaline, cortisol is pumping through your body. You're going to get a wide range of anxiety sensations, and one of them being nausea. So if you keep entertaining those irrational thoughts, oh my God, what if I'm going to vomit? It's going to be horrible. It's not good. you're going to fear that environment more and more. You're not going to want to stay there if you're going to feel like you're going to be sick. But use rational thoughts. Pay attention to those rational thoughts. I haven't thrown up before when I felt this way, and I won't now. Just accept the sensations. Remember that this is a natural bodily response. So when you're in that situation, you feel that icky feeling, make sure you don't snowball those irrational thoughts to the point where you actually run away from the environment. You don't want to do that. Like I said before, you're just going to strengthen your fear of that environment. So use rational thoughts and go with the flow. Accept the feelings and accept the bodily sensations. The more you stay put in that environment, the more you lessen your fear of that environment. Number 4 is passing out. Another common fear I had. And so whenever I was in the classroom or in a public place, the same thing as vomiting, I would feel dizzy, lightheaded, and all of a sudden I would react emotionally towards those sensations. Oh my God, what if I pass out and make a fool of myself while I do it? It's going to be embarrassing. And so I was afraid of that social judgment. I didn't want people judging me as being a weirdo, an outcast, somebody who's mentally ill. So I was afraid of those sensations out in public. And so this strengthened my fear of public places and thus keeping me more in my safe zone at home, suffering from agoraphobia. And so I discovered an amazing rational replacement thought if you have this fear. So remember this. Somebody who does pass out, their blood sugar drops. But when your anxiety systems is active, your blood sugar actually rises. And so you don't pass out when you have anxiety. Very interesting. Very interesting. So use this rational replacement thought whenever you are in a situation where you fear that you're going to pass out. And this replacement thought is going to lessen your fear of that symptom, that sensation. And so when your anxiety response is active, when it's very high, you're going to feel like you're going to pass out because you're going to feel dizzy. You're going to feel lightheaded. But that's not necessarily the case. And I never passed out when I had severe anxiety. Never. But I always entertained those irrational thoughts. Number 3 is the fear of a loved one dying. And so this was a huge fear for me because I was very dependent on my family when I was going through anxiety. I was dependent on my family a lot in my life. And so you may feel this way where you're relying on your relatives, your family, your close friends, your spouse, whoever it is, and they're providing you with that reassurance that you think you need, and you want them close because they are providing you with that reassurance. Oh, everything's going to be fine. Oh, thank goodness for that time being. But then, half an hour later, you're back into that vicious anxiety cycle. So anxiety recovery, and this is what I teach and help with my clients, is you need to become more independent. So I help clients and I help you on YouTube, my viewers and my podcast viewers, how to be more independent, how to develop tools that help you handle those challenging situations, that chaos. Because anxiety sufferers don't have the tools, don't have the proper tools to handle that chaos. So anxiety sufferers need to become braver and more confident. That's why when you don't run away from an anxious situation, you're becoming braver in that scenario. You're becoming more confident. And so develop the right tools, meditation, journaling, facing the unknown more often, and improving to yourself that, I can actually handle this anxious situation. So develop the tools, the techniques. You move yourself towards being more independent, and what happens? You're not going to be so dependent on those people anymore. You're going to be more independent. You know how to handle the chaos by yourself. And so your fear of loved ones dying lessens and lessens. And so when you do catch yourself thinking, what if, my child dies? What if my mom dies or my dad dies? It's going to be awful and I don't know what to do. And before you let that snowball, change that image of them dying or that thought to an image of them standing healthy, strong, powerful. They're healthy. They're powerful. They're powerful. So replace that irrational thought with a rational image or a rational thought, and say, I reject that thought. I don't want to think it. That thought is not in alignment with my higher self. Number 2 is developing a fatal disease. Another fear common with health anxiety. I was always afraid that pain, that sensation, that heart palpitation, that headache, all of that was something fatal. And so I was constantly sensitized to all of this, all of these sensations. But it's important to know that the anxiety response causes a wide range of bodily sensations. So I misinterpreted all of these sensations as being life-threatening, a threat to my health. And so these irrational thoughts came about based on how I was feeling. And so I also recognize that my anxiety also came about because of other tragedies around me. So maybe a relative passes away, or maybe a close friend gets an illness, or maybe you're hanging around somebody who's constantly complaining about their health or their situation, and thus creating anxiety within you. There's many different scenarios. So changing your lifestyle is crucial for anxiety recovery. Changing who you hang around. Changing what you do daily, your habits. Are you Googling your symptoms all the time? That's a habit that needs to be replaced. Are you eating the right foods? Are you meditating? Are you spending time in nature? Is your job healthy for you? Is your family even healthy? Are they providing you with the right knowledge and energy? They could be bringing you down. So all of these lifestyle changes need to be worked on in order to become less sensitized. Stop putting band-aids on your anxiety. Stop placing yourself in front of the TV. Stop YouTubing all day long. Get in touch with yourself. Start developing these tools and techniques, and then watch your life change. Start facing the chaos. Start facing what you really don't want to face. Number 1, you might have guessed it, having a heart attack was my number 1 common fear. It's common throughout people suffering from GAD. That heart palpitation, paying attention to your heart all day, drives people to the emergency room. And you might be out in public, you might be at the movies, you might be on the bus, and you fear that sensation, all of a sudden, all of these irrational thoughts. What if I have a heart attack here and I make a fool out of myself while I'm doing it in public, fearing what others think, but also not being close to the hospital, not being close to family so they can help you out. That is important. You can see the relationships through all of these fears. The social judgment out in public, the fear of embarrassing yourself in public, and the fear of developing an illness altogether. So having a heart attack, that feeling was a very common fear for me. And it's the most common fear I see with agoraphobia. And so when you start to fear that heart palpitation and you leave that environment, you're not going to go back there. But when you do, like I said before, that anxiety response is going to activate. You're going to feel the sensations, and all of a sudden, you leave. But it's important that you stay. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's video. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I post everything on anxiety recovery and self-help. If you want to reach your higher self, become more than you are now, subscribe. Listen to the podcast on iTunes and Google Podcast, the Anxiety Project podcast. And lastly, remember, do not let anxiety define who you are, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.